get into the one industry, and I'm not saying one's better than the other, but depending on what you want to do,
Yeah.
I sold retail in high school, and I saw people in their 40s selling retail, and I was like, the same person with the same skills in B2B technology would make 3 times as much.
Yeah, that was a big, really well in software, and I'd gone to school with them or worked with them previously and said, well, I'm, exceeding my quota now. I'm pretty sure I could do that selling technology.
Right, because in the harder industries, you get the habits, you get the grind, you get the backbone,
Yeah.
the tough, thick skin, and then you apply that to a different industry that has a higher reward.
Right.
Yeah.
I was selling auto insurance. And while I was finishing up school,
Yeah.
I was selling auto and home insurance through AARP lines for the Hartford Insurance Company. So I was selling to primarily older folks, selling them auto and homeowners insurance, making 80 to 100 calls a day.
Yeah.
Did that for a couple of years. After you do that, everything else is everything's gravy after that.
It seems a lot easier.
Yeah.
And what do you like about selling technology?
I think the opportunity. So it is very entrepreneur based, even when you're with these big mega companies. It's what you make out of it. You've got all the resources. I've been able to travel a lot, meet, work with Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, travel all over, learn about cutting edge processes and things that big companies are doing. That's been a big draw, and then just be able to provide for family.
That's it. And I think a lot of people look at the big portfolio companies that you're just order takers or account managers. And, I did a stint at IBM through an acquisition, and it was just the opposite, for us. The revenue was actually flat for the first 2 quarters. And we were like, whoa. So you have to sell inside to get all the people within the account team to help you. And you still have to sell the account.
Yeah.
And you're still competing against the same competitors.
Yeah. I think that's a big piece right now. It depends on which business unit you're within a lot of these organizations and which accounts, timing, territory, talent, that type of thing. It can be order taker 1 minute and completely different. And we're in a place now with our cloud organization, it's fun because we're competing with Microsoft, AWS that just have a larger grasp. Right. Oracle's got a legacy install base, but we have a lot of that startup feel, which makes it exciting every day.
Yeah. And did you do a startup in between?
Yeah. So I was at a Nitro Cold Brew coffee company.
That's a startup.
So, yeah, that's a startup. The last couple of years, we actually we grew pretty fast. So when I started, there were 50, 60 customers, enterprise type customers, and well over 500 enterprise type customers within a year. So we provided Nitro Cold Brew on tap to companies like Amazon, Netflix, Salesforce for their employees. And it just grew really fast.
Yeah, I'm a cold brew convert.
Nice.
Yeah. You got to be careful. There's a lot of caffeine in there.
Yeah.
It can be misleading.
Definitely, within the first 6 months, my tolerance grew big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. First week or so, I was in meetings and I was drinking the product, right? Because we had unlimited access. We roast it, we brew it. One of the largest cold brew production facilities in North America. So we roast our own beans and produce it and deliver everything. So I was drinking the cold brew, and I'd find myself 20, 30 minutes into a meeting at like 1 PM having the shakes. Yeah. And I literally had to pause the first meeting, kind of say, I'm sorry, I'm talking like a crazy person right now. I have to, and they started laughing and they were like, yeah, that'll that'll go away.
That's it. When when you're drinking hot coffee, the hotness requires you to drink it slow.
Yeah.
You have to cool it, wait for it to cool, and you don't gulp it like that. You have to sip it.
Yeah, old habits die hard.
Yeah.
So that's exactly it. It's nitrogenated, so it gives it a smooth flavor.
Yep.
And with the coldness, you don't even realize you're drinking twice as much caffeine. And you can drink an 8-ounce, 12-ounce really quick, and then there's problems.
Then there's an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And we found that with a lot of our customers too. We would see there's kind of a honeymoon period of 2 weeks or whatever. So we'd bring on a new large account.
Yeah.
And they'd have an office building of 600-700 employees. And their consumption the first 2 weeks would just be wild, and then people self-regulate.
Yeah.
Because they realize I'm gonna, pass out in this meeting if I continue like this.
Well, that's it. Now I know better.
Yeah.
It was exactly. That first 2 weeks, you're like, that's delicious. And right. Why do I start running up and down the stairs?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, you've been talking a lot about strategy lately on LinkedIn. What motivated that?
So holding the bag as an individual seller, you kind of scratch your head sometimes. I don't know about you, but sometimes you'll scratch your head and say, maybe your experience at IBM or wherever it was, but sometimes we're entrenched in business that has been successful, lines of business that have been successful anywhere for so long. And then we've got that revenue stream. And then sometimes you scratch your head and say, hey, well, if our competitors are doing it like this, or even things, they're just trade-offs, right? So if you come into a startup from your enterprise experience, you bring a different skill set to that startup, which can expedite the learning curve. And it's also cyclical. So when you go from a startup back into a large organization, you can bring a lot of these agile type skills and methodologies and processes where it's always a trade-off. So you don't get some of the resources, but kind of scratching my head saying there's got to be a different way where that's an area that I was weak in. So there's been several areas that I've just seen over a decade where I need improvement. And I've wondered sometimes, well, why are we doing it this way? Or there's got to be a different way we can do things. So I took a course and got a lot out of it.
Can you give us some examples?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things was the importance of a partner ecosystem, and that's no secret. It's not like, but how we utilize that right now with our customers and the power that has, and then even a partner ecosystem internally. That was one of the biggest things that I took away from that. If there's people within inside the organization that can help bring an idea to market or a process and get it started, it's wildly important.
Especially in your space, this the lone wolf, new product into a new market space, it's really tough.
Yeah.
You need development partners, and most of the time I was always successful teaming up with the bigger players. I was 100% startup guy until that acquisition. And my trick was to partner with the people that they bought the product before mine. And mostly it was they'd buy Sun equipment, Oracle database, WebLogic middleware, and then my stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
their pipeline turned into my pipeline.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. And I think that's more important than ever is our customers just have more options. If you're not finding ways to partner, and even if you don't have to trade all the secrets into everything, but just what you can learn from your combined, go-to-market strategy, the knowledge base that you can learn and then package to your customers as a resource. There's always that cliche trusted advisor. Well, what the hell does that really mean? Who cares? Like, it's just one of those like digital transformation trust. There's so many,
buzzwords.
Yeah, buzzwords. It's horrible. But there are actual resources that we can take away partnering and then package them up and deliver them. That was one key takeaway. And then there were a couple of use cases, case studies that we did, talking about creating a tribe internally and then sometimes having to take that outside of the organization, right? So not necessarily 100% going rogue, but in order to create that change and prove that it works, you can still stay within the hierarchy of like, this is the organization's main goal.
Yeah.
And they have an overarching strategy to get there. But maybe one business unit's lagging. If I can get a couple stakeholders, and they had some really good use cases of what's his name? Apple, only the
Jobs or
yeah, Jobs. Thanks. I'm having
it's the
brain lapse
nitro.
here. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so they had a great case study with Steve Jobs, basically, on when they came out with a new version of a operating system. It just wasn't ready to go to market, and he basically had a team where he rented out of his own cash reserves office space across the street, and he had his own team of developers that were within the organization, but they were off campus across the street.
Yeah.
And he made that project successful before he delivered it internally, and then was able to get people on board. But I think there's a lot to that. If it only takes a couple sponsors internally sometimes to move the needle and make big changes.
And that's it, because a lot of people who haven't worked in a portfolio company or a large company, they're now all matrixed. Kind of everybody copied the matrix organization. There's good parts and bad parts of it.
Yeah.
But what it does is the natural leaders kind of surface from it.
Yeah.
Because they don't have authority. They have to earn authority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one piece after doing this for a while that that's so funny that you said that, because the last couple of years that's really come to light where I thought, well, where did this come from? Well, someone's got to take the lead eventually if things aren't working, and have accountability and say, well, if they're doing it this way, we got to put a plan together and put that into action. And as a frontline seller, I think it's a disservice if people holding the bag aren't having that kind of conversation. And shame on the leaders too if they're not having that communication with the contributors to the organization, because it's only going to lead to people getting better.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll find people working on strategies, or I've experienced it, where it's say, well, why are we doing this the same way? Eventually we gotta try something different.
Especially because you're not what you're selling. You're not the leader,
Mm-mm.
right?
Yep.
but you have probably more accounts, more
Yeah.
market share than the leader.
Right. So it's an exciting time, because I've seen it. No company is too big to fail.
No.
And you've seen it, and it can change like that. It could be within a year, and then also it's the grass isn't always greener on the other side. No. So I am very fortunate to be in an organization that has an incredible amount of resources, that has amazing technology, a dedicated team, resources for training. It's coming from the startup world over the last couple of years. And when you get back into an organization like an Amazon or a Microsoft or Oracle, it's outstanding. And you realize, wow, the world is at your fingertips. You take some of that stuff for granted. When you talk about running your own business, coming back in, it's like anything I could desire or want to really equip myself, if I align myself and ask the right people, it's all there. It's 100% available. And I would urge sellers, right? If you are part of a big organization, regardless of what you're selling, hardware, software, retail, it doesn't matter. Creating those relationships with the right people that share a vision you have a lot going for you. It's like,
Yeah. And I think too many reps are too tactical. If it's not closing this quarter, I don't work on it.
mm-hmm.
And, sure, you got to work on them. Revenue comes first, but next quarter's revenue comes second. Right?
Yeah, no kidding.
And third
No
quarter's
kidding.
revenue comes after that, and then fourth quarter.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you talked about that too, a little bit, about folks that are order takers. I think there's a big change right now, and especially in software, change with strategy is aligning renewal reps or account managers with account executives. You can't check in with customers at the end of the year, 2 months before their renewal as a sales rep, and say that type of strategy is done.
Yeah.
And you got to align yourself, even if it's new business. If it's legacy accounts and you're growing a footprint or just trying to fight, customers leaving, it's a joint effort. And I think the companies that understand that are the folks that are going to win.
Right. I mean, those days of just trying to get your product on that bill of materials in December, is not a strategy, because the decision of what we're going to use is being made all the time. Your
Mm-hmm.
competitors are in there setting the vision and trying to get rid of you.
Right.
And if you're not in there explaining why they need to go with you, in January and in March and in June and July, you're going to get cut out. And then all of a sudden you're surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you see that in your universe? So outside of this podcast, do you have services that you sell for training or?
Well, I work with reps. So I hear, the only reps I work with are the ones that have the hardest of the hard sales. And there's two major problems I help them with: getting meetings with new accounts, and then how to close large, complex sales. So first, they have to understand how companies buy. A lot of people think, oh, you go in and you give a big presentation, you do a proof of concept, and then you win. It's like, no, it's like herding cats. It's like what you're doing internally. Some people are behind you and interested in helping you. Other people don't care until they have to. Being able to do large, complex deals is hard. It certainly is a lot easier if you have a footprint there, but most of the people in my courses don't have a footprint. So I help them go through that. And I think today, what's so different is that typical prospecting processes don't work as effectively because everyone's doing them.
Yeah.
The why me, why now emails, the cold calls. CIOs aren't going to switch their platform based off of you calling them.
Right.
It's going to be.
What are you seeing? What are you seeing prospecting wise that is resonating? Because I have some ideas or just tactics that I've used and trends that I've seen. But have you seen anything specifically prospecting for net new accounts?
Yeah, I think you can't look at it as just prospecting. I think you have to look at it as starting a conversation with a stranger and building a conversation that turns into a business conversation. And this came out of me starting my own company, because I went from, being a top rep and then selling my consulting and training services. And I would cold call, cold email, and it got me something, but not nearly enough. So then I said, well, let me break this process down the way I always did before. And then I put in this system, a step-by-step process to become known, liked, and trusted. And especially when they don't know who you are. Like they don't know who Tim is, but they know who Oracle is.
Right.
So you have a good place to start. And if they're a customer already and they continue to be a customer, they're probably at least neutral to happy, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Well, one thing that I've seen to work, and kind of to your point, the push versus pull marketing. is spending the time. I'd rather, something that I do is, even for net new accounts, is I think the trade-off, the ROI on putting in the time to do the research and to look through the financials, look through the competitors' financials, even if it's a one pager, or create, I don't need that. Like you said, have the conversation first, but know enough about the layout, because all that's available now. I mean, there's
Oh,
no excuse.
oh,
I
yeah.
can go into every conversation knowing enough to be dangerous, to make it seem credible,
You know,
which a
what
lot of people
Google can
just don't
do,
do.
they don't. You know,
Yeah.
because when I started, it's like you could maybe get an industry catalog or magazine. It wasn't the internet. Then the internet comes along, and slowly but gradually, more and more information there. And I think reps, they still play the mass game instead of the focus game. You know, how many deals do you really need to do to crush it? Who's most likely to fit that model? What do they care to talk about? It's not you, it's them,
Right.
right? So doing the
100%.
research will tell you what they care about.
Yeah. And I've seen it just, data is king. Activity metrics based on decision on where we're spending our time at the macro or micro level as a sales rep, organization, business unit. It's hands down evident right away that making the tons of calls, and it's different, and maybe it's a different business. If there's a transactional QVC type mop
Right.
type product, well, it's a different sale.
Yeah.
But for enterprise or B2B, large 7-figure transactions, or even smaller, right? Just starting that conversation of 5,000, 10,000, an initial purchase or whatever, they take a lot of time, and
Right.
the close rates, it's a no-brainer. It's like, yeah, it's going to take half of your day to do this research, but if I'm creating a focused email where the subject line has Brian in it, and I referenced the last podcast you did, and not specifically the last podcast, one sentence where you gave an example of when you wore a yellow baseball hat 20 years ago, and I write Brian yellow baseball hat in the subject line, and it triggers you right away. He listened to my podcast from a week ago, and specifically he was 13 minutes in when he heard that story where I referenced that, and then the rest of the email is just everything 100% into what you do, your organization.
Right. Because when you look at an email, it's, do I know this person? What do they want?
Right.
Is something in it for me, or is it all about them?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you articulate that? That's a skill.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes time.
It takes a little time,
Yeah, it
and
takes
you
a
got
little
to
time.
become better and better at it.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, this has been a fun conversation. Where can people go to follow you?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn, right? Tim Corey, search Tim Corey, Oracle, LinkedIn. You can shoot me an email, tim.corey@oracle.com. If anyone's got any questions, I can help in any way whatsoever if you gained anything from this. But yeah, that's the easiest way to find me.